Welcome to MedShark Insider with Bill Fukui, your expert host on all things medical marketing and SEO.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of MedShark Insider. And today we're going to talk about a subject that's not really marketing related. It really is on practice management and really the guts of even just getting started in a practice. And today I have the privilege of having on the show Joanne Tanner. And Joanne is she's a dental business coach, and she's also a specialist in transitions and a transition specialist for dental practices. So those practices that are looking to either buy or sell practices, she has a special expertise in that. And that's really kind of what we're going to be talking about today is some pearls that she has to help practices avoid some of the pitfalls and kind of leverage relationships and situations so that they can make the most of their opportunities. So welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me.
You know, I've known you for a number of years now, and we both worked with, similar clients, etc. And I can say you have a unique way of working in the individual practices. I mean, I'm not in the practices like you are, and see the inner workings of it, everything from financials to staffing to, patient counseling, whatever. Do me a little favor, share a little bit of your background with our audience because they don't have the benefit.
Well, absolutely. More than 40 years ago, if you really want the math, it was 45 years ago, this Navy recruiter got a hold of me. It's amazing. And I joined the United States Navy. They promised me training, on-the-job training as a dental hygienist. And being from Detroit, I just thought, Bill, I'd be stationed in Chicago. That's what happened. You join the Navy to see the world. So after basic training in Orlando, dental technician training in beautiful San Diego, and hey, it was snowing and blizzard in February, March in Detroit. I'm having a great time. So not knowing they're going to look at my dream sheet, and any military people that are listening to us, I was an E1. That means nothing, all right? They don't look. But guess what? They looked, and they sent me to the Naval Regional Dental Center, Naples, Italy. So after serving there for more than 2 years as a dental hygienist, they sent me to Oakland. And then when I did get out 2 more years later, I decided to study business. So again, I did 5 years clinical hygiene, and my passion is dentistry. Then when I finished my undergraduate in business, I decided I wanted to finish my master's in business. Yes, I put that GI Bill to good use and used all my veterans benefits for all those thinking about joining the military. So then I started coaching dentists in the early 90s. And that's when I first met you, and you helped me with website and marketing. And that time we were getting on planes. It was way before the internet. And now, of course, I have the ability to really help people on all aspects of the business, from buying to growing and preparing to sell. I'm not a dental broker, but everything from graduation and up to retirement, I help the dentists in every part of the way. Good.
That is, Joanne, I think you're a little humble, and such, but I have to share a little accolades. You have a rapport and relationship with your clients that I think I think that needs to happen when you're working with a practice when it comes to really sensitive things, and it becomes a very personal thing. Sure. You're able to have those types of relationship with the clients that help you get, basically peel back the onion is what I call it. Kudos to you. But hey, a question. We recently started talking, and I shouldn't say recently, but your focus on becoming a dental practice transition specialist. What in dental consulting and coaching, guided you to focus on that?
It's a good question. About 12 or 13 years ago, I was retained, unfortunately, by an attorney where there was a transition that wasn't going well. And after the second time, I started doing some research. And you know what I discovered, Bill? Well, let me back up. When you buy a home, we certainly wouldn't consider purchasing a home without a third-party home inspection. And it wouldn't be the brother-in-law of the broker or the seller. So when I discovered there aren't any true buyer representatives, yes, there are dental CPAs that play a very, very important role. But you see, what I do in addition to understanding the numbers, I truly get behind the numbers and see how are they producing this $1.2 million worth of production? What are the mix of procedures, the philosophy of treatment? Because if the seller is overdiagnosing or maybe doing procedures that the buyer is unable to do, we want to, as you mentioned, peel back all the layers so we truly understand what are we getting. Yes, part of it is overhead. And again, the CPA plays an important role on that, but understanding all aspects. It's truly my passion to help them understand what is it in the practice. So we look at x-rays, we look at the schedule. We'll look at the mix of dental insurance. In many parts of the country, that's an important aspect if the seller is or is not in network with the different insurance companies.
Yeah, you know, going back, now that you mentioned, you know, going back about 12 years when you started doing this, I remember 20 years ago, I was in the, it was more on the orthodontic side, where we had these, at that time, practice management companies. They're now, I think they refer themselves as DSOs now. They were out buying practices and stuff, and they were actually doing IPOs, going to the, you know, going to Wall Street looking for money, and they were buying up as many practices as they could to look good to Wall Street. And when I went through that process, these, and we did marketing for these, you know, national, you know, dental practice management companies. When I asked them, how do they, you know, determine the value of practices, I think at the time they simply used, you know, gross revenue, you know, as a way of determining. There's got to be more to it than that.
There definitely is, and that's one aspect. The brokers will do at least 2, most likely 3, yes, gross revenue, but it's also about EBITDA, the earnings before interest and taxes, right? And because it's not just what they're grossing, it's what the take home is. If one doctor is grossing $1 million, but his overhead is 67% versus another one, the overhead is only 52, which one do you want to buy? So that's exactly what we open the eyes to the young doctor who may not know what they don't know. And the broker really wants to sell. And so if the buyer doesn't ask, there aren't any answers provided. So I'm actually lecturing over at one of the dental schools on Thursday morning. And I'll share with you my opening line because this is so very true. I'm going to say to the students that your professors, they don't want you to hear what I'm about to tell you. And that is that someday the dentistry is going to become the easier part of your day. It's not going to be about margins. Oh, wait, it's a different kind of margin, the profitability margin that you haven't learned about yet.
Yeah, you got me at the very beginning when you said he's not going to want or she's not going to want you to know this or whatnot. But yeah, I love it really is the business of dentistry is kind of the missing. I think what's missing out of the dentist toolbox when it comes to running and really thriving and enjoying a practice, you know, at the end of the day, it is I mean, we all get into everything that we do. It's a lifestyle. I mean, you got into what you did. I got into what I did. because I like the lifestyle. I like the lifestyle of what I do, and I enjoy what I do. Dentists are no different. They've got to, you know, at the end of the day, we're all in a lifestyle type of business when you're a professional service provider.
Absolutely. And you're right, it's about relationship. And the dentist's success, 1/3 will be about his or her clinical skills.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll find that the other 2/3 have to do with management systems and communication. Communication from the dentist to the team, from the team to the patients. So the communication, as you mentioned earlier, relationship, that's critical.
You know, when I would go into practices before we started doing marketing, and we even did stuff like TV and radio, not just internet, but, you know, big dollar TV ads. Before we started running that, I needed to see how those practices operated. It makes no sense to generate leads and phone calls and get people in here when I know they're not going to have a good experience or they're not going to schedule or whatnot. Getting the phone to ring is the easiest part of what we do. And you know, it's where the rubber meets the road is what you do. So we found that was exactly the case. There are practices that are wildly successful, and that's because they are driven from the top down by either a provider or a practice administrator that really carries the torch and creates the culture and builds the systems, etc., that makes for a, you know, this incredibly wow experience when it comes to dentistry, which, let's face it, most patients don't necessarily look forward to going to the dentist.
And the patient doesn't truly understand the quality of care. They know, are you nice to me? Do I like you? They don't understand the margins. But you're right, Bill. I help the doctor understand, what are they buying? What am I getting? And getting behind the numbers. In addition, I tell them what they can do to make it even better, because I'm a system specialist, from scheduling. Another example is accounts receivables. Although the young doctor may not be buying the accounts receivables, it's important for them to know how much the accounts receivable credits are, because you see, that's a liability that the seller must address. And if they don't, that reflects upon the goodwill or the lack of goodwill by the buyer, because the patient knows the office had that money on the account. So there are things that we can tell them how to make it even a smoother and better transition.
Oh, super. So you're talking about a number of things when considering purchasing a practice. What would you say would be the most common, like, pitfalls or issues that new practice owners, would-be owners, when they're looking to buy a practice, where do they end up either making mistakes or having to go backwards or waste money, waste time? What are those pitfalls? What would you say would be the most common pitfalls?
There's many, so it's difficult to pick one or two, but one of the top ones that comes to mind right now, especially in California, is understanding the role of Delta Dental. If the new doctor is going to be a network with Delta Dental, we can actually help them assess how much Delta Dental is in the practice. We have an app that integrates with more than 50% of the softwares out there. And so if they listen only to other people or the broker, they may not have the full picture. I'll give you an example. And we might be getting into too much detail, but the Delta Dental, the fee schedule could be as much as 30 to 50% lower on a particular fee. And so the revenues that the buyer is going to be generating will be significantly less unless they're prepared to create more volume. And how do you do that? You need to be efficient. We need to maximize the schedule. We need to maybe utilize an extended function assistant. If the seller's been doing his own hygiene, you may actually want to hire a hygienist. The CPA says, wait, that's going to increase revenue, or that's going to increase wages. However, we need to maximize our doctor's time, and cleaning teeth is not part of that. So sometimes it means
Absolutely.
bending.
I think the understanding, the roles of, the hygienist and how to create efficiencies and systems within a practice for, really leveraging production in ways that are, they're just hidden opportunities. They're there. You just need to somewhat reveal them in a way, because they probably thought about them at one time, but they never really thought through the entire process of, ultimately, it's their time. They are the most expensive asset in that practice. No question.
I have another pitfall I'll share with you, and that's the procedures. And I commented briefly on it earlier, but I have a practice right now that the seller was looking, and we ran the reports, how many fillings they're doing compared to how many exams, compared to how many crowns that they're doing. And compared to all the hundreds of other practices, it's important that we're able to look to see, wow, there's certainly a lot of crowns compared to how many exams. And sometimes the buyer doesn't know how to look at the ratios and what's high or what's low. And again, maybe there's procedures that I can show them how to add from a billing or coding standpoint. So the pitfalls, we could talk for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some of the stuff that you talked about initially are pretty, obvious ones that I wouldn't say obvious, but I'm saying those are going to be the most common, is they haven't really thought through it. But I think once they start asking those kind of questions, all of a sudden they start, I really got to ask a lot more questions. It just kind of lets them know that there's a lot more things when it comes to purchasing a practice. One of the things that you also mentioned was staff. Where does the evaluation of staff or your staffing, where does that fall within, the decision to buy a practice? And does the staff come along with that? Or, what if there's fallout? Or what if I don't like these people? Or I don't like this key person or whatnot? How do you work with that?
And you're right, the buyer is unable to meet the staff. Typically, 90% of the time, they don't know what they're getting until the deal is done.
Wow.
Yes.
I've never heard that.
They are not, because if we tell the team, and by the way, I prefer the words team versus staff. If we tell the team that doctor is going to be selling, they get nervous. And the fear of the unknown, oh my gosh, what about, and then they start looking, there goes the value to the seller.
Yeah,
so as
absolutely.
Scary as it is, the seller most oftentimes is unable to share the information with the team. And so we're prepared to go into the office, remote or sometimes in office, after hours, frequently on a Saturday or Sunday, especially if it's a larger practice. It's not just a 2-hour in-office assessment, because we look at the treatment acceptance, we look at the schedule. It's not just looking at 5 or 10 charts. So understanding what the team, who they are, especially if anyone's related to the seller, if the spouse is working as the bookkeeper, as the office manager, and therefore we need to add to that. So understanding what you're getting.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the minute we started talking about not being able to interview or meet with the staff, do you ever have them look at the practice's social media, their Facebook, and check out what their personalities are online, that kind of stuff?
And the reviews, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect. Reviews, a whole nother thing.
You're buying the history of the practice. So we definitely do an online search. I was thinking of another pitfall to share with you, because just last week I received a call from a banker that unfortunately they're having to deal with a loan that they provided, that they realize now that the client, not my client, in the future they will refer, but the client didn't have someone verifying the data. That unfortunately the seller and the spouse of the seller actually put procedures, added patient names, so the Dentrix reports didn't match the financial, and no one was double checking. Wow is right. Wow. And if no one is verifying the data, then how do you know? And it's so sad. She called and she said, I didn't realize that people still did this, and it's out there. The data wasn't accurate. It didn't match the bank.
God, that's terrible.
It is, so that's a big pitfall indeed, that she's having to pick up the pieces. Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe take a step back. I'm not ready, I'm not in the midst of all the practice, assessments and all, you had, I know you put together a very comprehensive process when you're working with clients on purchasing a practice. I mean, just in some of the documents you shared with me, I mean, I'm like looking at that going, holy cow, there's a lot of stuff here, man. But before we get to that point, at what point or how long should a provider start looking at, the potential of buying a practice? How long does this practice, process take from the time, a dentist is saying, I think I'm ready, both from a maturity standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a clinical standpoint, from my personal life, I've reached a point where, I'm ready to, do something. What kind of advanced time do they need to be planning for? What does that look like?
It's a great question. I believe most of the banks want at least, if not 2 years of practice before they're actually going to give them a loan. Rarely do you see right out of dental school. So minimum 2 years, I'd say on average, it's 3 to 5 years. I've had some rock stars that have done it earlier. In fact, by the way, Bill, I'm not even sure if I shared with you, I produced a dentist. Yes, my youngest son is a dentist. So I have many of his classmates calling me now, and they graduated 5 years ago. So it's about that time. They've learned what they don't want to do, especially with COVID happening. If they were an associate and they were laid off, they're no longer in control when they go back to work. So that's why they're out and about saying, I want to have my own.
Gotcha. So COVID, you're saying COVID actually helped accelerate that mindset or the desire to
the be in control, as well as it kicked over many of the sellers that said, okay, I'm done. So we have both at it. So it's not a demand higher or lower. It's just we have more buyers wanting to be there, right? And of course, you mentioned DSO earlier. It's still a big part of it, and that's growing fast as well. There's still many private practices and still a very large section where it will be profitable and important to have the private practices out there.
Great. So what would be the first step? So if I make the decision that, I talk to my wife and I'm like, I think we're at a point in our lives where we could make the leap. I'm ready to make this leap.
And typically we suggest buying one versus a startup. And by any of the listeners that want to have our slide that says the advantages of buying versus starting up. And see, the startup is beautiful. You have it exactly where you want it. Everything's brand new, but I don't have any patience. So when you're ready to buy, you and your family need to decide, where do we want to live? And that's the most important. Live in your community. Don't live an hour away. So if you want to be in San Francisco, you want to be in Los Angeles or San Diego County, figure out what part of the country you want to be in. And then focus your efforts in that area. I have a doctor right now, he's been looking for close to a year, and He finally sent me an email 2 days ago. He says, I think this is the one, because he's been talking to doctors. He had one too far from him. He says, you're right. Good practice, bad location. So focus on where you want to live, and then making sure it's a good location. Buried in a medical plaza isn't the way to go. I was in the forefront in the 80s looking at retail centers, and it has to be about convenience. We're helping a doctor move his existing pediatric practice to a retail center right now. And it's a great Safeway, CVS, and plenty of parking. So location, location, location.
That's so, it's very interesting that you say that, because I would have just assumed, and actually my dentist works in an office, one of those, medical office buildings, and it didn't even occur to me, but you're absolutely right. I never would have found them otherwise. I mean, I had to do a lot of searching to find them. They are not getting a lot of, exposure, a lot of other types of patients, and location is absolutely, you should be, part of your decision on a location has to be on, does that help business development?
Yes.
Not just, do I like the space? Does it help with business development?
Does it help with it? And of course, Bill, you're so good on getting the phone to ring. As you mentioned earlier, it's important that the team is engaging while talking on the phone. When I help my clients do any HR, placing the ad or screening of the applicants, especially for front office, I make the phone call and make sure that they are, how do they sound on the phone? Are they smiling? Can I see and hear that smile while they're on the phone? Because if they're not, that's not a good fit for the front office.
Yeah, I wonder, have you ever had a potential buyer actually secret shop that practice?
Oh, indeed. Sometimes I don't want to, I can't do that for them, but yes, we've talked about it. Just so they can see. There's another marketing service for you.
Yeah, I'd love to, because I guess, they don't know what they're buying, and that first impression is what you're buying in many cases.
That's right. It's all about impression.
Well, super. Hey, Joanne, do me a favor. I appreciate all your time. You've given me probably 30 minutes of your time with some really good stuff here. How can one of my audience members that are either have friends or they're actually looking themselves, how would they go about finding you?
Great. Go to our website, joannetanner.com. That's JoanneTanner.com, or send me a text, 916-591-2720, and I'll look forward to hearing from them.
Joanne, you mentioned the website, and I recently went there, and you have a great video on the opening page. Nice job on that, and I encourage people to check out that website. There's good information there, it's not a brochure. There's some good stuff in there, and whether you're an existing practice or one that's looking to build one, I think that would be a good place to start.
Thank you.
You bet, Joanne. Hey, thank you again for this. And then, you know what? I'd like to maybe have us talk on a future interview. I had a couple other topics I think that you would be the perfect expert to help shed some light on.
That would be my pleasure.
You have a great day, Joanne.
Until next time. Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for the MedShark Insider with Bill Fukui. Join us next week for another dive into all things medical marketing. All episodes can be streamed at www.medsharkdigital.com/MedShark-Insider.